Jesus is out of time. We see sides of Jesus' personality, aspects of his humanity that we've never seen yet.
This is the last time they talk, the real last time they get to talk, that Jesus even sees Judas as a friend.
This is the biggest season we've ever done by far, and that's because the story demands it. This is the season where, Jesus, before he goes to the cross, kicks a lot of butt and takes a lot of names. You've never seen this side of Jesus before.
What makes season 5 of The Chosen different from previous seasons?
Well, I think we're at the point where Jesus is out of time in our story, and he knows that basically the whole reason he came to Earth is days away, and for as much as he's been trying to warn and inform his disciples and prepare his followers, he's learning that not everything is quite clear to them, and that causes a bit of consternation, a bit of concern, but also, because he's Jesus, he knows who we are and the brokenness of humanity and the fallen nature and the sort of waywardness of the story of his people throughout salvation history. So I don't think it's all completely new to him, but it's new to them. Mm-hmm. And we see sides of Jesus' personality and aspects of his humanity that we've never seen yet thus far. And that I don't think anybody's quite captured on film in any kind of retelling of the story in this way, especially in the first 4 seasons of build up to the ultimate sacrifice Jesus made on behalf of humanity.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned some of these different aspects of Jesus, or the different parts of his personality and character that are going to come out in this season. And we've seen already from some of the things that have been released, a little bit of teasers here and there. We've seen the poster of Jesus going into the temple with the whip. Right. And I know that in John chapter 2, it actually says that Jesus made the whip. So this wasn't just a spontaneous thing where he saw a whip and he just started going crazy.
Yeah,
but there was
a whip shop
a purpose for it.
Went into or anything like that, or a whip vendor.
Yeah.
And he didn't buy it on first century eBay. He made a whip out of cords.
Yeah.
And basically we sort of know how it goes, and people will get to actually see exactly our version of how that went. And it is something to behold. How they wrote the story, how they wrote those scenes was just beautiful and powerful and emotional. Yeah. And I think really it's kind of what this has been, the last 4 seasons has been building to.
Right. So we know that obviously Jesus didn't ever sin. And so what he did was not a sinful thing, but actually the Bible talks about be angry, but not sin. So this was a righteous anger. As an actor playing this part of Jesus, it's easy to show anger in a negative side and what that can be destructive. But how did you prepare for that moment or that scene where you know that you're going to have to demonstrate anger, but from a righteous standpoint?
So being the perfect, sinless Son of God, Jesus didn't experience the kinds of anger to the fault of sinfulness that we as humans do, right? So what does that mean? Well, you have to consider what is generating the anger. And in this case, it was essentially the desecration of the temple by the people who are supposed to uphold as models of righteousness and faithfulness to God the Father, what temple worship should look like. And at that point, it was a mockery. People were using the temples for extortion, basically. And I think Jesus, through the eyes and lens of God, basically hit his limit, and he couldn't take anymore, and he needed to quite literally clean the temple, and make an example of what was happening there and his displeasure with it all. Because ultimately, the sacrifices that and the worship that should be going on in the temple are all for God. And when you have the corruption of humanity inhabiting the temple, the first thing he needed to do was just cleanse it. He just needed to get rid of it. And so it's from that place that he's acting. So for me, as the actor who isn't God in reality, but playing God, playing Jesus, how do I relate to that? Well, I can't relate to the sinlessness of Jesus. I can only relate to the humanity in my own flawed sense of it. But I aspire to please God in the way that he wants us to please him, to worship him, and to be completely pure of heart, to be undefiled, as Jesus wanted the temple undefiled, to make the temple of our own bodies, my own body, as undefiled as it ought to be for when entering into worship for God. So for me, it's a matter of considering, like, what would an offense to God look like? What kind of a reaction would my offense to God cause within him? And then to try to play that as best as I can for the scenes. And I think we see that in a way that we haven't seen before in season 5. So it's really exciting. Some of the things that we did, and especially the scene in the temple, I think it's going to take a lot of people. I think a lot of people are going to be kind of shocked, because it's such a passionate display of, God's longing for the righteousness of his people.
What makes season 5 of The Chosen different from previous seasons? I mean, we left off season 4 just as Jesus was starting the triumphal entry, and we know as we read the Bible where that's leading to. But tell us about season 5 and the goodies that we have in store.
Well, thank you, John. It's good to talk to you again. Yeah, there's a couple of things that I think really make it stand out as dramatically different. Number one is the backdrop, the look, the production design, the cameras, all of that stuff. This is the biggest season we've ever done by far. And that's because the story demands it. Season 1 set in a small town, Jesus's ministry is just starting. He's gathering 1 disciple, 2 disciples at a time. Now the, entire region knows who he is. The word has spread, and it's Passover week. I mean, this is the biggest week in the calendar for the Jewish people. Well over 1 million people conservatively are all gathered in one city, centered around one place, the temple, in order to honor and remember Passover. And Jesus enters into this where there's a majority of the people have heard about him and believe he's the conquering king and the coming Messiah. A large chunk of people, the ones with the power, want him dead, and they're all gathered in one place. I mean, it is a powder keg. Mm-hmm. And we also know that, at the beginning of the week, those people, the majority of them who believed he was the conquering king, by the end of the week also want him dead. So big backdrop. The setting is huge. Jerusalem is the big dog. All the people are there. I mean, this is just a big story that demands a big stage. And so that's one of the reasons why we are really pushing people more than ever to see this in the theater, because this is big. And so you'll feel that, and you'll see that. The second thing that makes it quite different is you've never seen the side of Jesus before. I mean, we've seen hints of it, frustration. In a couple times in Capernaum, he's going after the Pharisees a little bit, but I mean, this is turning over the tables time. This is cursing a fig tree to death. This is Jesus telling the religious leaders on their home turf in the Holy Temple, how are you going to escape being condemned to hell? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just brutal. But in I call it it's kind of the kick butt season too. And I hope I can say that on Charisma. But this is the season where, like, Jesus, before he goes to the cross, kicks a lot of butt and takes a lot of names. And it's a side of Jesus that we haven't seen this consistently before. Yeah. And so it confuses his followers. It confuses and horrifies his enemies. And so this is a big season. I always say Holy Week is the most important and impactful week in the history of the world. And this season is our most intense season. So it's 3 I's. I did that. I'm very proud of myself.
That's very good. Alliteration is very important there.
Yeah, which is also an I word.
Yes. Yeah. So Dallas, I mean, we're already talking about this. I mean, this is the Passion Week, and Jesus is very passionate about the zeal for your house will consume me. I mean, that's one of the verses that he quotes. And actually, I was talking to a friend in preparation for this, and they said, from the teasers that we've seen already, where Jesus has the whip and he squeezes it, you can kind of hear that leather crunch, and you know that he's going to turn over these tables. We read in John 2 that Jesus made the whip. So this was not just a spontaneous outburst of anger, but rather a demonstration of being angry and not sinning. How are you showing God's wrath in human form? How are you actually incorporating all of this?
Well, that's what The Chosen is, right? I mean, it's the Bible, the Gospels especially, are in many ways bite-sized accounts of each of the great things that he did. Well, not each of them, a fraction of them. John says, right, we couldn't contain all the things that he did, and then he did this, and then he did that, and then he met this person, and then he met that person. And you don't actually get to experience or dive into the humanity of anyone that he encounters, really. And to some extent, some of Jesus's humanity, we oftentimes see portrayed in paintings, on stained glass windows, words on a page. But when we are watching it in media form, like sight and sound, like we have the opportunity to do, so often it still feels like stained glass windows and words on a page, right? Jesus still feels like a distant figure. So you brought up a great thing that some people forget. Jesus made the whip. He fashioned the whip. We show that. We take our time with that. So if we're going to show that moment, we're going to, of course, because this is what we always try to do, show the context of that moment, show what leads to that moment. What are the things that kind of trigger this series of events beyond just God, was playing out a story that he's been telling since the creation of the world. And besides fulfilling certain prophecies, Jesus, the man, also was experiencing this as a man, not just as God. And so we dive into that. We show you what the disciples are thinking and doing as they witness his behavior. There's a really key scene in this season where the disciples watch him disrupt the entire temple, turn over the tables, really negatively impact many people's lives. He does physical, in many ways, you could call it vandalism. That's not what they'd expect from the Messiah, from the sinless Son of God. They have to wrestle with that. We show you that. That's the kind of thing that we do that you don't necessarily experience in other projects, or that you don't see in the scriptures. It scandalized everybody, but what exactly did that look like? So we show you the religious leaders getting together and going, what did he just do? And what is going to take? We just lost this 1 week is how we finance the majority of our operations, and he just upended that. How are we going to do? And we're trying to serve God here.
Oh yeah. And
here he is threatening all of that. This guy he needs to go. And then we see the disciples going, he upended our entire religious system. We're thinking we're about to be unified to take down the Romans, and he just divided everybody. Like, what's going on? So we show you that. And I think that's the key.
Well, somebody had to do it, and Luke Dimyan is that person. He is playing the role of Judas in The Chosen, and this is season 5 that we're going to be talking about, which is a very pivotal season for his character. And Luke, it's great to be able to have you here on Charisma to talk about your portrayal of this infamous character.
Well, thank you for having me, John. Happy to be here.
So, Luke, there's videos of you talking with Dallas and with other people about you, kind of how you got the role of Judas. And originally, you had auditioned for other disciples, and then I know Amanda Jenkins was like, he's the guy for Judas. Can you tell me about what it was like for you to actually receive that role? And I know you had to actually kind of keep it a secret for a little bit too.
Yeah, it was very interesting. I guess maybe not so interesting, because it was mostly in an email conversation. It was very much like, hey, audition for Judas, don't tell anybody. And I was like, okay. And then I did this live stream. No, not a live stream. That's incorrect. I did this live audition, streaming audition on EcoCast Live on Actors Access with Dallas Jenkins. And I read the parts, and he showed, honestly, I have to give Dallas this. He does not show any favoritism or interest in the reads. If you give him like something that he likes, he's like, yeah, nice. And he like continues on. I was like, oh, I don't need this. So I personally thought like I had bombed the audition. I think he enjoyed the fact that I nerded out with him about the film Jesus of Nazareth before that, talking about Ian McShane's portrayal of Judas Iscariot. So the fact that after all that, after he said, was like, yeah, we don't know, but we'll get you in the show somehow. I just assumed that that wasn't it, but I'd get it later. But he played me well. He had me assume that I hadn't gotten the part, and then I think a month later they sent me a subsequent email telling me that I got the part, which was great. I was very happy to have been cast and to have been cast in this role specifically.
So I want to hear about that conversation that you had with Dallas. You mentioned that in the film Jesus of Nazareth, you appreciated this portrayal of Judas that was in that. Can you give us a little bit of an insight about what the things that you thought were very interesting about that particular character? And were you already thinking about Judas at that time?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about Judas in general, he's a very prolific figure, not only in biblical history, but in a lot of other forms. Whenever someone tackles the story of Jesus, most people jump right after that. I was like, all right, how does Judas look? How is he being treated? And even in other secular forms of media, like in theater or in songs, music, you have famous bands like Judas Priest. You have the very popular song Judas by Lady Gaga, my new personal theme song. Regularly. It's what I just really enjoyed about Jesus of Nazareth, which I had to watch alone. I recommended it to my family. It's like, hey, we should all watch this on Easter. And my parents looked at me like, no, that is 3 hours long. We purely own it for just namesake, just the fact that it's a Jesus movie, but we don't watch that Jesus movie. Come on, please. But I, being a bit of a cinephile, was like, well, I want to watch it. And I did. And I just really appreciated Ian McShane's Judas, just his earnestness, his care, his like gentle nature. And then the fact that as the movie progressed, it almost looked like he got tricked into portraying Jesus, not necessarily like he meant to, but it happened like out of his own like he just didn't see it coming. And so I just really appreciated that portrayal by an already incredible performer. His resume precedes him, and so does his talent. And so it's a pretty solid camp to be in, the Judas camp. I'm trying to fill some pretty great shoes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's a very difficult role to play. And I know I've seen other interviews where you're talking about how Judas has been a character that you've actually not necessarily associated with, but you've had empathy towards. And now that you've been playing the part of Judas, I know there's a scene that actually has come out already, or that the Chosen YouTube has put out, where you as Judas and Jonathan Roumie as Jesus are sitting across the table from each other, having this in-depth conversation. And Judas has kind of gone from this apprentice character that when you first meet him to now we know where he's going, and we're getting ever closer to that. How have you been able to portray that role? And then let's kind of lead up to that table talk right there.
Oh, it's mostly in the scripts. The scripts kind of lead to that point, the small little growths and build-ups to those moments. I think it was mostly in there, and I was just very thankful to have a very receptive scene partner like Jonathan to just take in everything that I was giving him and to give me things back to either react to or hone in on during our scene and conversation.
So is that one of your favorite scenes that you've been able to have?
Oh, it was definitely up there. I think when I read the scripts, that was the scene I was most looking forward to film, because in my eyes, I was like, oh, this is the last. To me, this is the last time they talk. Like, this is the real last time they get to talk. Like, that Jesus even sees Judas as a friend. Because after that, I feel like there's nothing much they can do. But I think the scene that surprised me, that became a very big favorite as well, was the scene with Caiaphas. And it purely, I was just gonna go through that scene very casually, very practically, but then Richard Fancy, who plays Caiaphas, just blew me away. And so getting to perform with him really made that scene all the more special.